The first snowfall of the season had blanketed the streets in a quiet hush. It was the kind of evening where the world seemed to hold its breath, leaving only the sound of my boots crunching against the icy sidewalk as I trudged home. The city lights struggled to pierce through the fog, casting faint halos on the cobblestone streets. I barely noticed the package on my doorstep until I almost tripped over it. Wrapped in brown paper, it bore no return address, only my name scrawled in an angular, almost mechanical script. Curiosity burned hotter than caution. Inside, I found fragments of something ancient, shards of stone etched with intricate symbols, their edges worn as if by centuries of wind and water. They felt heavy in my hands, imbued with a strange warmth that prickled my skin. Beneath them was a single sheet of parchment, yellowed with age, inked with the same angular script. The artifacts form a map. The path is incomplete. Finish it. The words sent a chill skittering down my spine, though I couldn't explain why. I wasn't a detective or a treasure hunter. I was a professor of history, specializing in obscure rituals and the mythology surrounding ancient civilizations. This sort of thing should have thrilled me. Instead, unease coiled in my stomach, tightening as I noticed faint black smudges on my fingertips. I swore I had washed my hands before leaving work. The symbols on the stone fragments felt familiar, though their arrangement eluded me. I cleared the table and began piecing them together, their faint luminescence casting a pale glow on the darkened room. As I worked, the unease grew. Each symbol seemed to pull at something just beyond the edge of my understanding, like a word on the tip of your tongue that you can't quite grasp. When I finally fit the last piece into place, my breath caught. Together, the fragments revealed a rudimentary map, a scattering of markers across continents. They weren't just any locations. These were sacred sites, temples, stone circles, burial mounds, places shrouded in mystery and lore. And they were all marked with faint, intersecting lines that converged on an empty space in the center. I leaned closer, studying the convergence point. There was no label, no indication of where it might be, only a void. As I stared, the map seemed to hum faintly, its glow pulsing like a heartbeat. Somewhere in the distance, a dog howled, a mournful, lonely sound that pierced the quiet night. The air in the room grew heavy, oppressive, as though something unseen pressed against me. I pushed back from the table, the chair legs scraping harshly against the wooden floor. My pulse quickened as I glanced around the room, my eyes darting to the corners where shadows seemed to pool unnaturally. The map lay silent now, but its presence was undeniable, radiating an inexplicable gravity that filled the room. I couldn't help but feel I'd taken a step onto a path I couldn't turn back from. By morning, the map's glow had faded, leaving the room steeped in an uneasy stillness. The fragments sat on my desk, their jagged edges strangely inert in the daylight. Yet I couldn't shake the memory of their hum, nor the oppressive weight that had lingered in the air. Despite my apprehension, I brought the fragments to my office at the university. My colleagues were always eager to dive into mysteries, and I hoped someone might recognize the symbols or the sites they marked. To my surprise, when I showed the fragments to Angela, our department's expert in ancient languages, she frowned. Her usual enthusiasm was absent. "These look fabricated," she said, her voice uncharacteristically flat. "But they're unnervingly accurate." "What do you mean?" I asked, my pulse quickening. She hesitated, tracing a finger over one of the symbols. "It's hard to explain. These glyphs don't belong together. They're from completely different civilizations, centuries apart. But here," she gestured to the fragments. "They're perfectly integrated. That shouldn't be possible." Her unease mirrored my own, and when I pressed her for more, she shook her head, muttering something about needing time to study them further. That evening, I returned home with the fragments still in my bag, their weight feeling heavier than it should. I placed them back on my table and studied the map again, tracing its lines with trembling fingers. The void at its center seemed darker now, a patch of ink that almost swallowed the light. Then, the whispers began. Faint at first, like wind stirring dry leaves. I froze, straining to hear. The sound grew louder, voices weaving together in a language I couldn't understand. They didn't seem to come from the room, but from the map itself. "Who's there?" I called out, my voice breaking the stillness. The whispers stopped instantly, replaced by a suffocating silence. I backed away, heart pounding. My gaze fell on the fragments, which now seemed to shimmer faintly in the dim light. My phone buzzed, shattering the tension. It was Angela. "I found something," she said, her voice taut. One of the symbols, the one on the largest fragment, matches an artifact stolen from a site in Mesopotamia last year, a temple dedicated to something shadow-related. But here's the thing. Every site on that map has been robbed. Someone's desecrated them all. Her words sent ice through my veins. "And the void?" I asked. She hesitated. "It's not on any map. It's like it doesn't exist. Or it's been erased." A heavy pause hung between us before she added, "I don't think you should keep those fragments, Sarah. They don't belong here. Something about them feels wrong." As I ended the call, I turned back to the map. The fragments glowed brighter now, and a faint hum filled the air. And I knew, deep down, that I was no longer just studying the map. It was studying me. The air had changed. I could feel it the moment I stepped out of my front door, the crispness of the winter evening tinged with something sharper, heavier, as if the world had tilted slightly off balance. In my bag, the map fragments seemed to hum faintly against my side, though I told myself it was my imagination. Angela's words echoed in my mind. They don't belong here. For days, I had wrestled with what to do. Discard them. Return them to the sites they were stolen from. But the map's pull was irresistible, its dark void a question that demanded answering. My research had led me to a remote forest in Eastern Europe, a place where ancient markers had been found buried beneath the earth, aligned in patterns that mimicked the map's symbols. I arrived at the site just as the sun dipped below the horizon. The forest was dense, its skeletal branches clawing at the sky. The path was faint, overgrown with moss and tangled roots. My breath frosted in the cold air, the only sound the crunch of my boots against the frozen ground. The deeper I ventured, the heavier the air became. Shadows seemed to shift unnaturally, stretching toward me as if drawn by the fragments in my bag. A faint light pulsed ahead, barely visible through the thick trees. When I reached the clearing, I stopped short. It was exactly as the map had shown. A circle of ancient stones jutted from the ground, their surfaces etched with symbols that mirrored those on the fragments. At the center of the circle, the ground was bare, a patch of black earth that seemed to drink in the dim moonlight. As I approached, the fragments in my bag grew warm, their hum intensifying. I hesitated, every instinct screaming at me to leave. But the pull was too strong. I knelt in the center of the circle and laid the fragments on the ground. The moment they touched the earth, the clearing came alive. The stones began to glow faintly, their symbols pulsating with an otherworldly light. The hum grew louder, resonating through my chest, and I felt the earth beneath me tremble. The fragments shifted, aligning themselves with the stones in a pattern that mirrored the map. A line of light shot from one stone to another, then another, until the entire circle was connected by a web of glowing energy. At its center, the black patch of earth shimmered, the void from the map materializing before my eyes. I reached out, compelled by an unseen force. As my fingers brushed the void, a vision overwhelmed me. A flash of rituals long forgotten, figures cloaked in shadow, chanting in a language I couldn't understand. Their voices rose and fell like waves, and at the center of their circle was a symbol I now recognized from the map. The vision ended abruptly, leaving me gasping for air. The void pulsed, its darkness deeper than anything I had ever seen, as if it were not absence but a presence, something vast and ancient. The light from the stones dimmed, the hum fading into silence. I staggered back, my pulse racing. The void remained, its inky surface rippling faintly. And then the whispers began again. This time, they were clearer, more distinct. They spoke directly to me, though their words were not in any language I knew. But I understood their intent. Go further. Finish the path. I fled the clearing, the weight of the fragments now unbearably heavy. I returned home in a daze, my mind consumed by the void and its whispers. The fragments sat on my desk, their glow dim but constant. The map was complete now, its symbols fully illuminated, but the center, the void, remained dark and unyielding. Angela's voice on the phone was sharp with concern. "You found it, didn't you? The markers." "Yes," I said, my voice hoarse. "They connected. But it wasn't just a map, it was a key." "A key to what?" she demanded. "I don't know." Her silence was heavy, but then she said, "Get rid of it, Sarah. Whatever this is, it's not meant for us." I didn't answer. I couldn't. Because deep down I knew I couldn't stop. That night the whispers returned, louder and more insistent. They spoke of the path, of a destination beyond the void. I didn't need to ask what lay there. I already knew it would be nothing I could understand, nothing I could explain. The next morning, I packed the fragments and set out again. This time the map led me to a remote plateau, where the land stretched barren and lifeless under a slate-gray sky. The void had grown more defined, its edges sharp against the pale ground. As I reached the plateau's center, the air grew thick, as though I were wading through invisible water. The fragments vibrated in my bag, and the void began to shift, a ripple spreading across its surface. I laid the fragments on the ground once more, and the same light as before enveloped the space. The void expanded, spilling outward like ink spreading across a page. A gateway formed, its edges shimmering like liquid shadow. Through it I could see nothing, only a vast emptiness that seemed to pulse with a life of its own. The whispers surrounded me now, their voices overlapping in a crescendo that filled my mind with fragments of meaning. They beckoned me forward, promising answers, knowledge, and something darker. I stepped closer, the pull of the gateway irresistible. The air crackled with energy, the ground beneath my feet trembling. As I reached the threshold, I hesitated, my hand hovering just above the swirling surface, and then the whispers fell silent, replaced by a single voice. "Choose." The void shimmered, waiting. The silence was deafening. No whispers, no hum, just the suffocating stillness of the void before me. It rippled faintly, its surface as black as an abyss, yet alive with a subtle, hypnotic movement. The word echoed in my mind again, low and resonant, as if the void itself were speaking. "Choose." My breath hitched. The air around me felt heavy, dense, like the atmosphere of a storm that had yet to break. The ground beneath my feet was cold, harder than stone, yet unnervingly pliable, as though it were bracing for the weight of something far greater than me. The gateway shimmered, revealing flashes of something beyond, a vast, shifting expanse where shadows twisted and writhed in patterns I couldn't comprehend. Shapes flickered at the edges of the vision, indistinct but teeming with a presence that seemed to see through me. For a moment I felt myself drawn forward, my body responding to the silent pull of the void. The fragments at my feet began to glow again, their light pulsing in rhythm with my quickening heartbeat. "Finish the path." The voice was neither commanding nor imploring. It simply was, as inevitable as the passage of time. I wanted to resist, to pull back from the precipice, but I couldn't move. My feet were rooted, my hand trembling as it reached forward of its own accord. Just as my fingertips brushed the surface of the void, the world shifted. The plateau dissolved into a swirling landscape of shadows and light, fragments of places I couldn't recognize, and yet they felt achingly familiar. I saw the sacred sites from the map, their stones towering and ancient, their symbols glowing with a cold, otherworldly light. Around them, figures moved in silence, their forms cloaked in darkness. They were neither human nor wholly alien, their movements graceful yet disjointed, as though existing on the fringes of time itself. The air was alive with an unspoken energy. I felt it coursing through me, filling every cell with a cold, electric hum. The figures turned toward me, their faces obscured, but their intent clear. They were waiting. The map, the fragments, the stolen artifacts. It was all leading to this moment. I tried to speak, to ask why, to understand, but my voice was swallowed by the vastness around me. The void shifted, and the scene changed. I was standing in the center of a great, cyclopean structure. Its walls were smooth and black, carved with the same intricate symbols that adorned the fragments. A towering monolith rose before me, its surface pulsing faintly as if alive. And at its base, the final fragment lay embedded, completing the map. The realization struck like a thunderclap. The path wasn't a destination. It was a process, a ritual that had spanned centuries, using stolen pieces of the world to forge a connection between realms. The monolith pulsed again, brighter this time, and the figures reappeared. They stood in a circle around me, their heads bowed in solemnity. One must bear the cost, the voice intoned, low and resonant, vibrating through the chamber. I didn't understand. The map had led me here. The ritual was complete. What was left to choose? The monolith answered. Its light surged, and I felt a presence, immense and infinite, press against my mind. It wasn't malevolent, but it wasn't benign either. It simply was, ancient and unknowable. Memories not my own flooded my mind, visions of civilizations lost to time, of rituals performed in desperation and hope, of the void opening again and again, drawing seekers who had stood where I now stood. Each of them had chosen. Each had paid the price. I staggered back, the weight of the knowledge threatening to crush me. The void shimmered, offering no escape, no reprieve. And then I understood. The map, the fragments, the rituals, they were not simply to open the path. They were to bind it, to seal the connection, and contain the force that had once threatened to consume both worlds. The void required balance, a tether to keep its energy from spilling into our reality. The cost was a part of myself. Choose, the voice repeated, softer now, almost gentle. Tears blurred my vision as I stepped forward, the weight of inevitability pressing on my chest. The monolith glowed brighter, its surface shifting to reveal symbols I recognized as my own name, my own essence, etched into its eternal surface. I placed my hand on the monolith, and the world fell away. The whispers faded, the void's pull loosened. The connection between realms grew calm, stable, as though the storm had passed. I felt myself become part of the structure, not lost, but changed, tethered to the very fabric of the ritual. When the light dimmed, I stood once more on the plateau. The fragments lay inert at my feet, their glow extinguished, their purpose fulfilled. The void was gone, and the whispers were silent. But the weight of what had passed lingered, a shadow in my soul. The path was complete, but its presence remained. And as I walked away, I felt the faintest echo of the void stirring, a quiet reminder that it was never truly gone, only waiting.